Now, Second Chronicles chapter 32, we have some challenges that Israel's going to face in this chapter here from the Assyrians. The Assyrian king is Sennacherib at this time. If you're familiar with your Assyrian history, he's going to come in and invade Judah and try to take over and pull this. He's probably noticing they have this abundance of wealth and prosperity, and he wants a piece of all that as well. This is not the first time the Assyrians have come against Israel. They've carried some captive already in the past, and so this is another attempt at going after Israel, basically. In verse 1, after these things and the establishment thereof, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came and entered into Judah, and encamped against the fenced cities, and throughout to win them for himself. And when Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib was come, and that he was purposed to fight against Jerusalem, he took counsel with his princes and his mighty men to stop the waters of the fountains which were without the city, and they did help him. So there was gathered much people together, who stopped all the fountains, and the brook that ran through the midst of the land, saying, why should the kings of Assyria come and find much water? And so now here's the thing is, so they have fountains, they've diverted rivers, they've done things to beautify and improve their land. And what they're doing is they're reversing all of that. They're letting the water go back through the normal rivers. They're not using the aqueducts to bring the water in to the area, basically, because they don't want, their philosophy is if Assyria comes in and realizes we're without water, we're less desirable to them. Why would they want to occupy land that doesn't have water? So they're de-resourcing in a way to make themselves less of a challenge or less of an opportunity for Assyria. Verse 5, he strengthened himself and built up all the wall that was broken, and raised it up to the towers, and another wall without, and repaired Milo in the city of David, and made darts and shields in abundance. So they're building up the walls of Jerusalem and the surrounding areas to prepare for problems to come from Assyria. Verse 6, and he set captains of war over the people, and gathered them together to him in the street of the gate of the city, and spake comfortably to them, saying, be strong and courageous, be not afraid nor dismayed for the king of Assyria, nor for all the multitude that is with him, for there be more with us than with him. With him is an arm of flesh, but with us is the Lord our God to help us and to fight our battles. And the people rested themselves upon the words of Hezekiah, king of Judah. And after this did Sennacherib, king of Assyria, send his servants to Jerusalem. But he himself laid siege against Lachish and all his power with him, unto Hezekiah, king of Judah, and unto all Judah that were at Jerusalem, saying, so Sennacherib comes down, and he's laying siege to the areas. Remember, the Assyrians, and we talk about this a lot more in not Chronicles, but in 2 Kings, the Assyrians had mastered a way of doing battle that became very prominent for them. What they would do is they would come to an area and they would basically just surround you and then block you off from all your resources and starve you out. When you're weak, then they attack you and take you down, basically. So they rip out your resources, and then they storm the area when you're weak and win. So it wasn't uncommon, I should say, and Assyria made it a very common practice. They really perfected this and did good at it, and other nations would use the same techniques as well. So while Sennacherib is out hitting Lachish, now if you remember, we've talked about Lachish in the past. Lachish is a suburb of Jerusalem. It's a little city out in the distance away from the main area of Jerusalem, just a couple miles out, not too far. But it's the wealthy place. It's where all the wealthy people live. The powerful people in Jerusalem live in Lachish. It's kind of their gated community, basically. So they're being destroyed right now. Why? They wouldn't come to Jerusalem. They wouldn't come in to Jerusalem to be protected by these great walls that Hezekiah has built up for the people. So while Sennacherib is out there laying siege to Lachish, he's sending messengers into Jerusalem, basically to warn them as well. So this is what they said. Verse 10, thus saith Sennacherib, king of Assyria, whereon do ye trust that ye abide in the siege in Jerusalem? Doth not Hezekiah persuade you to give over yourselves to die by famine and by thirst, saying, the Lord our God shall deliver us out of the hand of the king of Assyria? Hath not the same Hezekiah taken away his high places and his altars, and commanded Judah and Jerusalem, saying, Ye shall worship before one altar, and burn incense upon it? So this is just to give you some background here. You can look up, there's so much in 2 Kings around 18, 19, and 20, those chapters that you can look into from this to get more details about this battle and what happens here. The thing that's good to look at here is they're coming going, look, we know your king Hezekiah is probably telling you that God is on your side. And you've gotten rid of all these multiple gods. Now, the common tradition back then was there were regional gods, so a god of a land. So if you wanted to occupy that land, you worshipped that god. There were gods of elements. There were gods of actions like fertility and other things. So most of the nations around Israel worshipped many gods. Whatever gods would give them the favor that they wanted to do what they wanted to do, that's who they worshipped. And so this is where Israel is different, because they kicked all the other gods out and only worshipped one God, basically. And it was their God, not anybody else's God. And for everybody else around them, this just seemed weird, just crazy and weird. But it was the truth. They worshipped the true God, not all the false gods. So their perspective is important. And so this letter is written basically saying, look, your kings probably made you worship one God. We worship many gods. You know, we are mighty and powerful, more than just one God. Verse 13, know ye not that I and my fathers have done unto all the people of other lands? Were the gods of the nations of those lands any ways able to deliver their lands out of mine hand? Who was there among all the gods of those nations that my fathers utterly destroyed, that could deliver his people out of mine hand, that your God should be able to deliver you out of mine hand? So he's saying, look, we've conquered numerous lands. They all had gods. None of them, of their gods, helped them. So our gods help us. These gods, everybody else's gods are losers. They don't help you. Why would your God be any different? So from Sennacherib's perspective, the God of Israel is no different than the other idols that are being worshipped. It's a weird way to worship because it's different than idol worship, but it's worshiping a God. And so in his mind, he doesn't see the God of Israel as any different than the other gods of the other lands. And he's saying, why would your God be any different than the rest of the gods? That's because he's not looking for the truth here. There's a good little lesson for us in this. So we all know from our perspective, we're at the 20,000 level view looking down on all this history going, yes, but Israel worships the real God. Everybody else is a fake God. Their God's not really helping them. It's more their self-will and self-determination is helping them. But Israel has the real God, and that's the difference. And that's the same thing when we're talking with people about the truth. What's the difference? Well, one of us has a lot of truth, and that authority from God is worshiping the real God, and some might not. Now, I'm not saying, LDS versus everybody else in the world. I'm saying that some people, you just have to look at truth and understand, okay, I have to be willing, for me to understand truth, I have to be willing to look at it from outside my current perspective. I need to be willing to take other perspectives to gain that perception, to understand where the truth really is. So Sennacherib is not taking that perspective. He's just saying, look, nobody's gods have won against us yet. Why would your God be any different? Well, he's about to find out why their God is different. It will be different because they have the real God. So he's not looking for truth. He's trying to promote his own ideas. We got to watch out for that if we're trying to teach the truth or learn the truth, that we're not promoting our own ideas, but learning, being more open-minded about things. So verse 15, now therefore let not Hezekiah deceive you, nor persuade you on this manner, neither yet believe him, for no God of any nation or kingdom was able to deliver his people out of mine hand, and out of the hand of my fathers. How much less shall your God deliver you out of mine hand? And his servant spake yet more against the Lord God and against his servant Hezekiah. Now he also wrote letters to rail on the Lord God of Israel, and to speak against him, saying, as the gods of the nations of other lands have not delivered their people out of mine hand, so shall not the God of Hezekiah deliver his people out of mine hand. Then they cried with a loud voice in the Jews' speech unto the people of Jerusalem that were on the wall, to affright them and to trouble them, that they might take the city. So now there's people outside of Jerusalem, and they're speaking the Jewish tongue. They're using the Hebrew language to taunt Jews, to taunt Israel, basically. Verse 19, and they spake against the God of Jerusalem as against the gods of the people of the earth, which were the work of the hands of man. And for this cause Hezekiah the king and the prophet Isaiah the son of Amoz prayed and cried to heaven. This is where the difference comes in, the real God. Verse 21, and the Lord sent an angel which cut off all the mighty men of valor, and the leaders and captains in the camp of the king of Assyria. So he returned with shame of face to his own land. And when he was come into the house of his God, they that came forth of his own bowels slew him there with the sword. So that's what happens to the story here. And there's a lot more details if you get into 2 Kings about this. They woke up the next day and like all the leaders, all the commanders in the army were dead. They just woke up and there's a whole bunch of people dead, but no known reason why. So in this story, it says the Assyrian story says that Hezekiah paid a high tribute to Sennacherib to save the city. That's the Assyrian perspective. Sennacherib claims he took 200,000 people, horses, mules, camels, cattle, and sheep as spoil, as well as gold and silver. Another common theory is the angel was a plague or sickness. Another theory suggests that Sennacherib left the area with his troops quickly due to some rebellions in Babylon, which is not uncommon and even getting into these times. Even though Jerusalem was saved, it took many years for the economy to recover. So it was still a bad situation that they got into, basically. But that's what happened. Okay, so there's different ideas around what was going on, but it's really cool. If you get into 2 Kings, there's more details on this story over there as well. But definitely showing they had the real God. There is a difference, and Sennacherib just figured it out. Verse 22, thus the Lord saved Hezekiah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem from the hand of Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, and from the hand of all other, and guided them on every side. So there's a lot with this. Hezekiah is saved from not just Assyria, but other nations as well. And people are starting to realize their God works. Their God is with them. Holy cow, there's some amazing things that are happening here. We don't want to be messing with Israel. So verse 23, and many brought gifts unto the Lord to Jerusalem, and presents to Hezekiah king of Judah, so that he was magnified in the sight of all nations from thenceforth. In those days Hezekiah was sick to death, and prayed unto the Lord, and spake unto him, and he gave him a sign. But Hezekiah rendered not again according to the benefit done unto him, for his heart was lifted up, therefore there was wrath upon him, and upon Judah and Jerusalem. Notwithstanding, Hezekiah humbled himself for the pride of his heart, both he and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, so that the wrath of the Lord came not upon them in the days of Hezekiah. So Hezekiah was getting old and sick, had some problems. He didn't quite, live up to the agreements he made with God. Ran into some problems with that, and later figured it out. He had problems and he repented. So God said, okay, during your reign, the punishment won't happen. It'll be later, basically. So verse 27, and Hezekiah had exceeding much riches and honor, and he made himself treasures for silver and for gold and for precious stones and for spices and shields, for all manner of pleasant jewels. Storehouses also for the increase of corn and wine and oil, stalls for all manner of beasts, and cotes for flocks. Moreover, he provided him cities, possessions of flocks, and herds in abundance, for God hath given him substance very much. So they were greatly blessed because of Hezekiah's efforts. Verse 30, this same Hezekiah also stopped the upper watercourse of Gihon, and brought it straight down to the west side of the city of David, and Hezekiah prospered in all his works. Howbeit, in the business of the ambassadors of the princes of Babylon, who sent unto him to inquire of the wonder that was done in the land, God left him to try him, that he might know all that was in his heart. So he's dealing with people from the Babylon. At this time, Babylon was a bit of a vassal state for Assyria. There's lots of back and forth between Babylon and Assyria in history. Assyria tried to keep Babylon happy and satisfied, and Babylon was rarely satisfied and were constantly rebelling and fighting against him. And so Babylon's trying to understand what happened over here in Jerusalem, in that area, and it says that God left him to try him, that he might know all that was in his heart. So he's kind of testing Hezekiah a little bit here, basically. Verse 32, now the rest of the acts of Hezekiah and his goodness, behold, they are written in the vision of Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amos, and in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. And Hezekiah slept with his fathers, and they buried him in the chiefest of the sepulchres of the sons of David. And all Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem did honor him at his death, and Manasseh his son reigned in his stead. So now we're getting on to the next king of Manasseh. Let's go into the next chapter to see if Manasseh is going to do what his dad did and keep the commandments and keep things moving forward. Because right now Israel is really, really blessed, really prosperous because they're keeping the commandments and doing these things. And this is a good thing, basically, that we should be doing is when we follow God, he blesses us and helps us. So a great example of that in here as well. So let's jump into the next chapter.